Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our biannual webinar, What's Happening in PWS Research. I'm Susan Hedstrom. I'm FPWR's Executive Director. I am also mom to Jaden. He is 17 years old now, who has PWS. And also joining us today is Dr. Teresa Strong. She is the founder of FPWR and our esteemed Director of Research Programs. Today, Teresa is going to give us an update on the latest happenings in PWS research, along with a quick look at each of the 7 research grants that we recently selected for funding. As always, we will save time at the end of the session for questions. So if you do have questions, please feel free to enter them at any time through the Q&A, and we'll get through as many of those questions as we can at the end of today's session. So with that, Teresa, I'd like to hand this over to you so you can get started.
Great. Thank you, Susan. We have a lot that's going on in PWS research, so I'll go ahead and jump right in. I'll start by giving us a few updates on what's going on in the field, and then we'll spend a good bit of time talking about these newly funded research projects, but leaving enough time at the end for any questions, discussion, things that you all would like to bring up. So, as a reminder, our FPWR Grant Program supports research across the therapeutic development spectrum. Everything from research and discovery, that's our work in the lab, asking basic questions like what do the PWS genes do? How are PWS cells different from typical cells? Through preclinical development, which is if we have a target, a pathway that maybe looks like it's altered in PWS, can we change that, bring it back towards a normal pathway, normal functioning, and can we test that in different model systems, so PWS cells in a dish or PWS mouse models, to see if there might be therapeutic benefit. And then clinical development, so testing those ideas in human clinical trials, of which we can sometimes support some of phase 1 or phase 2. Phase 3 is usually a much bigger trial that is beyond what our finances could ever manage, and that is usually done by companies. And then the post-approval period. So when drugs or interventions, behavioral interventions, devices show some efficacy in PWS, what studies do we need to do to make sure that those interventions are being used optimally for our population? So the grant program will fund anything along that spectrum. Does tend to be more basic science and preclinical development, but again, all along that spectrum. And because our grant program has been going on now for more than 20 years, we have many things coming out of previous things that we have funded, and I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the new publications that have come out over the past couple of months. Just again, this is just a sampling, again, to give you an idea of the spectrum of research that FPWR is supporting. So I'll talk a little bit about this workshop that we held last year on using GLP-1 agonists. These are your Ozempics in PWS. There was a very nice study by Dr. Lucarelli. There's a blog on our website about what sends individuals with PWS to the emergency department. So those are more clinical things. Also very basic science. There's a couple of preprints that have come out. One is a network, the result of the work of a network of experts in PWS who have developed some new mouse models of PWS and then done the characterization of those models. And the goal here with this expert network is to characterize these models and then make them available to anyone in the world who wants to use them. So that's another way we try to leverage FPWR's funding, is to make resources that can be used by many scientists and hopefully help accelerate research everywhere. We also have a very nice molecular study on Magel2, which is one of the PWS region genes, really looking at how loss of Magel2 or mutations in Magel2 impacts cell function and gene expression. And that is relevant to both Prader-Willi syndrome, where we see loss of Magel2, and Shaft-Yang syndrome, where we see mutations in Magel2. And then a couple of interventions for individuals with PWS. One of these on the left is describing or optimizing the pretend play intervention. This is an intervention that Dr. Dimitropoulos' lab has been developing to help young children with PWS develop their social cognition or their social interaction. And this paper describes the optimization of that program. And on the right, an intervention for those of us who are caring for a loved one with PWS, which we know can be quite stressful. So trying to reduce that stress through a telemedicine based intervention. So some really nice work, just showing the breadth of the work that we are supporting. I'll talk a little bit more about the first paper that I mentioned, which is a paper that came out earlier this year, recommendations for looking at the safety and efficacy of GLP-1 agonists in PWS. And this is a question we hear a lot from families. They hear about Ozempic, they hear about Mounjaro or tirzepatide, and they, want to know, is this something that is going to be useful in PWS? So this is what we asked the experts in the field. We brought them together for a workshop to discuss this, and we did a pre-workshop survey just to see how are they using these approved drugs in their practice. So we know that it is being used in PWS. It's mainly being used for those individuals who have type 2 diabetes. And there was general agreement among these experts who met at the United in Hope conference with support from FPWR and Friends of IPSO. And so this took place last June. There was general agreement that these medications are quite useful in helping to control blood sugar levels, but most clinicians didn't see very much weight loss. So there was some stabilization of weight, as was the experience that most clinicians had. Some clinicians found it to be useful for helping reduce weight in their overweight patients, but by and large, people didn't see as much weight loss as you would expect or as has been reported in the general population. And of course, there were some concerns about the side effects and whether those might be more significant in PWS. So this group worked together to come up with some recommendations of how we would look at that. Since GLP-1 agonists are already being used in the PWS population, it might be, rather than doing a formal clinical trial, we might be able to gather enough information to answer the questions about safety and efficacy. And so they came up with, what are the things that they would like to see that patients and caregivers would report on versus clinicians. So this will guide us as we move forward to look at these GLP-1s and also all of the other drugs that are in development for general obesity, of which there is an overwhelming number. So I would say, drug development in obesity for a long, long time was kind of a real slog with very little success. But now the scientists and the companies are really cracking the code. And so we've seen, Ozempic, Mounjaro come over, and those target two different gut hormones, GLP and GIP. Ozempic is GLP only, and then GIP plus GLP is tirzepatide. But now there's a whole slew of medications that are targeting there are many gut hormones that are important in regulating hunger and satiety. And so there are drugs targeting many of those. One of these has been FDA approved, which is an oral GLP very recently. But all of these others, which are targeting various peptides and hormones that regulate hunger, are in clinical trials. The ones that are safe and effective will be approved, and then there'll be the task of figuring out which ones might work well in PWS and which ones might our kids and adults with PWS be more susceptible to have side effects. So we want to be ready for those questions, and we have several ways that we're doing that, including having a real world agenda for gathering that information. I wanted to mention one other publication that's just come out recently. This is not an FPWR supported publication. It was supported by Soleno Therapeutics, but I think it's really important for our community. And that is this paper. I have a link. You can download it. It's accessible. You don't have to pay money to download it. It is from some PWS clinicians, and it is looking at how to use VYKAT or DCCR most effectively in the PWS population. So this is a paper that is really geared towards other clinicians, probably other clinicians who have some experience with PWS, but are not sort of our PWS clinical superstars. So they may have questions about maybe they have two or three or four patients that they want to try on VYKAT, which is the new drug from Soleno to help reduce hyperphagia. And so it goes through all of these questions. How do you choose the right patient? What should you be looking for in terms of side effects? What happens if a side effect pops up? How do you manage that? And very nice flow charts and everything with which clinicians love. So if you're interested in using VYKAT and you're seeing a clinician or healthcare professional who maybe does not have tremendous expertise in PWS, I would download this and take it with me. I'll also use this moment to mention that you may be well aware, but if you haven't heard, Soleno Therapeutics has been acquired by Neurocrine Biosciences, and I believe that acquisition became formal and done a day or two ago. So we have heard from Neurocrine and been assured that nothing will change for families who are on VYKAT. They'll continue to interact with Panther as their specialty pharmacy, which I think we've heard great feedback about, and access should not change. So we look forward to helping Neurocrine learn a little bit more about the PWS community and continue to support our families. Okay, I did want to mention a couple of tools that FPWR has developed to support therapeutic development across this pipeline because, of course, our objective is to make everything move much faster from basic science through to therapies that are safe and effective for our loved ones with PWS. And I will actually mention two of those, the PWS Clinical Investigation Collaborative and then the Global PWS Registry. And of course, the Global PWS Registry is a favorite of mine. It was launched in 2015, and we have used it for so many things. So thank you everyone who has contributed their information, their story about PWS to the Global PWS Registry. It has helped us learn about so much. And to celebrate that, we developed a blog that is on our website, and you can see the link there of the top 10 learnings from the Global PWS Registry, which you can see here. And in the blog, there are links to more information. So if you're interested in any of these and didn't see it when it first came out, please visit that blog and link to those stories. So much though, and I'll just do a couple of examples. We learned through a study led by Sandy Roy and her team that babies who have G tubes have a much higher risk of getting complications than babies who get their feedings through NG tubes, suggesting that wherever it's possible to do so safely, an NG tube is preferable for infants with PWS. We also learned that growth hormone use drops dramatically in adulthood, despite the fact that growth hormone is recommended for adults. And that's because insurance and doctors stop prescribing and insurance companies stop paying for it. And that information is useful for us as we talk to companies that produce growth hormone and encourage them to seek approval specifically for adults with PWS, which is an ongoing I don't want to say battle, but an ongoing discussion with those companies. Another thing that I think every parent of a person with PWS needs to be aware of is that the risk of blood clots is higher in PWS than in the typical population. This is nothing to panic about because the absolute risk is still relatively low. However, blood clots are serious and can cause fatality. So it's really important to understand the risk factors and to be able to spot a blood clot if it happens. Again, if you go to the blog, it'll link to some resources. So please feel free to take a look through these top 10 learnings and like me, be grateful to your fellow PWS parents and caregivers who supply this information so that we can look at hundreds of individuals with PWS at a time and be able to make these conclusions because of the large number of participants we have in the registry. Um, we have also updated the registry at the very beginning of the year. So we moved to a new platform. It is a platform that it remains run by the National Organization for Rare Disorders. It's just an upgraded platform. So it's the Registry 2.0. It's got an improved mobile phone interface. It has some enhanced technical capabilities on sort of the backside for data analysis. It's got an updated look and feel, so we gave it a slightly modified logo. But if you were in the registry, all of the data migrated over. So we would still ask you to go into the new version of the registry and update your record. You'll have to reactivate your account and then do updates. I will mention also that there is a new module in there for families who are using VYKAT. We see on social media all the time people saying, well, how long did it take you to see an effect? Or are you seeing this side effect? And that's great, but if we put all of that information into a central place like the Global PWS Registry, then we will have that information. We can continue to gather longitudinal data on the safety and the effectiveness in our families, and we'll be able to report that back to the PWS community. So we ask that everybody who has a person on VYKAT, please consider contributing your data about your experience going on to VYKAT and what you're seeing with respect to effectiveness to the Global PWS Registry. We're also excited that we're going to translate into Spanish and French. We've called it the Global PWS Registry, but it's really not that global if it's only available in English. So we're excited that the new platform allows us to start with translations. I also wanted to mention one other new project that is going through the registry. Some of you may have already been participating in this. This is a study by Dr. David Evans. It's an FPWR funded study to look at early indicators of challenging behaviors in PWS. So Dr. Evans has developed some questionnaires that he thinks might be able to predict what challenging behaviors are likely to come up in children and young adults with PWS. And so there are 6 surveys that are involved in this project, and we will ask you to complete them every 6 months. So if you have been doing this project, it's probably time to go back in and do a new update on it. If you have not been involved in this project, it is not too late to join. You'll see a lot on social media about the project. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or reach out to Lisa or Jessica on the FPWR team. But the long-term goal of this project will be to identify the earliest signs of challenging behavior so that parents can, sort of be prepared and maybe take steps to mitigate those behaviors. So if you are like me and you have kind of a crazy life and you only know what to do because your calendar tells you what to do, one way to update the registry is to schedule a meeting with Lisa Mattisbeck, who is a study coordinator at FPWR and an administrator of the Global PWS Registry. If you scan this QR code, you can pick a time that works for you on your calendar, and Lisa will show up and help guide you through if you have any questions about the registry, if you need to reset your password, whatever, Lisa can help you with that. So think about doing that. It's a great way to, get it on the calendar when there are so many other busy things in our lives. I also want to mention the activities of the PWS CLIC, which is a network of physicians that are caring for more collectively for more than 3,000 individuals with PWS. We currently have 36 sites that are members of the PWS CLIC, the Clinical Investigation Collaborative, and their goal is to improve the quality of clinical research and medical care for individuals across the lifespan. And they are busy doing that in many, many ways, one of which is addressing this question of whether infants need a sleep study before starting growth hormone. For years, it has been the standard or the recommendation to do a sleep study before starting growth hormone, but that may be less necessary in younger babies. And so Dr. Emily Paprocki and Sani Roy have done a couple of things to really understand what is actually happening out in the world. And what they found is that many experienced PWS clinicians uh, believe or often start their infants with PWS on growth hormone before the sleep study is completed. In many cases, but not all, and that's the key, with careful monitoring, growth hormone can be safely started. And that has the advantage of getting babies on growth hormone as early as possible. They also looked at sleep study data from 4 of the CLIC sites and found that most infants after a sleep study don't need major intervention. Sometimes they need a little oxygen. That again supports that you may be able to start growth hormone prior to a sleep study. So together, these findings suggest that a clinically stable young infant with PWS may be able to start growth hormone without the full baseline sleep study if they're appropriately monitored. And of course, that's the caveat is that the clinician has to feel comfortable that they are able to monitor the safety. But this brings about a larger question about standards of care for babies with PWS and making sure every baby that is born has a great start. And to address that, we're funding a project that is again being led by Dr. Sani Roy with Lynn Bird and many members of the CLIC to develop standards of care for infants with PWS. So this project will bring together doctors, other healthcare professionals like dietitians, and families to talk through what is the evidence for standards of care with respect to feeding, nutrition, respiration, sleep studies, growth hormone, all of those things. And they expect to come out with a set of recommendations. As part of that project, we are going to or Dr. Roy is currently developing with input from families, a survey to go into the registry. We will ask families of little ones, age 0 to 5, to fill that out about their experience in the NICU and how prepared they felt when they came home so that we can optimize that. We expect that to become active in the summer and would ask as many families as possible to complete that. It is a way of contributing to the newly diagnosed families that they get the optimal care and best experience that they can as they are receiving a diagnosis of PWS, which we all know is challenging enough. I did want to mention that we have many clinical trials ongoing in the PWS field. Please visit often our PWS clinical trial page or sign up for our clinical trial alert so that you can learn about these trials as they become available. And there are more and more openings, so it's really an important way to know what's going on. I will also mention, in case you haven't heard, that Aardvark, the phase 3 study, the HERO study, as many of you have heard, is currently on clinical hold. So the FDA and Aardvark are working together to look at some cardiac changes that occurred in that trial or a different trial that used the same drug, actually, in healthy individuals. to make sure that the drug can be used in a way that is safe for our kids with PWS, which of course is the highest priority for everybody. So we don't have any news about when that trial might be starting up again and in what form, but we definitely will keep everybody informed of that as we learn it. Okay, I want to jump now into the new grant awards for the spring. We have a couple in the area of genetics and cell biology. These both this time are focused on genetic therapy for PWS. We have four that are in the realm of targeted therapies and preclinical development of these therapies for PWS, and two in the realm of clinical care. So, starting with the genetic therapies, as a reminder, every person with PWS has the PWS region genes there, but inactive or silenced on the maternal chromosome. So, in the normal case, the PWS genes are expressed from the chromosome that was inherited from the person's dad. And in PWS, that's either missing for those with deletion, or it's missing because the entire paternal chromosome is missing for those with UPD, or it's inactivated for those with an imprinting defect. But in all of these cases, there is an intact maternal chromosome 15, which has the genes sitting there. They're just silent. And so much of gene therapy in the PWS field is aimed at activating or unsilencing those genes. And there's a lot of potential ways to do that. And we have been supporting projects looking at these different ways, trying to discern what is going to be the most effective way to move into the clinic. That's the stage that we are at now, and we're continuing that work by supporting Dr. Charlie Gershbach in his lab. So Dr. Gershbach is an expert on CRISPR technology and using CRISPR to activate gene expression as we would need in PWS. And we have previously supported some of his work examining which CRISPR tools are going to be most effective in the PWS region. He's also really done some very detailed work that is beneficial to the entire field, looking at the chromosome architecture in that region to really understand the signs and signals on chromosome 15 that regulate that gene expression or silencing. And his work has been successful in activating gene expression on the maternal chromosome 15 in stem cells and stem cells that have been gone into neurons in a dish. But what we really, really need is a CRISPR approach that can activate the genes in a mature stem cell. So the stem cells in a dish that we typically get are more like fetal stem cells. And since we would be treating babies, children, potentially adults with gene therapy, we want something that works in mature neurons. So the goal of this study is to establish the regulatory features that hinder this unsilencing in mature neurons, which is trickier to do than in less mature neurons, and test combinations of these CRISPR elements to ensure stable activation of the PWS genes. Because that's the other thing. We're going to need the genes to become activated, and then we need stability across the lifespan of the individual with PWS. So we're excited about this project because Dr. Gershbach's group has been successful at unsilencing the gene in cells in a dish. He and his group are leaders in the field, and there is a real need to treat patients that have more mature neurons to achieve that long-lasting effectiveness. And the long-term goal of this project is a one-time therapy for lifetime reactivation of the maternal copies of the PWS region genes that could be given at any age for a person with PWS. Another gene therapy approach that we are supporting in this round comes from Dr. El-Sadi, and we know from other work, actually from some other FPWR-supported work that was done by Dr. Younghee Jang at Yale, that this protein, G9A, is really important in regulating that silencing of the maternal allele. Well, Dr. El-Sadi is an expert in G9A and the biology of G9A. And here he is going to try to specifically block G9A, but the specificity is really important in this case. So G9A works all over the genome, and what we would like to do is block G9A specifically at the PWS region on chromosome 15, but let it do its work elsewhere in the genome. So he is looking to identify specific sequences and molecules that are involved in bringing that G9A to the PWS region and doing that silencing so that he can disrupt that process, again, specifically in the PWS region, not everywhere else in the genome. And we're excited about the project because it has a high potential of unsilencing the maternal copies. We know G9A is critical to regulating that silencing and unsilencing process in the PWS region. And Dr. El-Sadi has unique expertise in targeting this specific protein. So getting it where it is specifically targeted in this region. The long-term goal of this project is to develop small molecules drugs that will specifically restore expression of the PWS genes, but not affect expression of genes elsewhere in the genome. Okay, so now we'll move on to the grants that are looking at new therapeutics and developing new therapies for PWS. The first is a study from Dr. Kai, who has previously shown that the gut hormone CCK is present at normal levels in a mouse model of PWS. And this is a hormone that is important in signaling fullness or satiety. So the hormone is there, but the brain of the PWS mouse is not really responding in the way that it should. And even adding more CCK isn't really making the brain respond as well as it should be responding. So the goal of the study then is to identify which neural circuits in the brain and which parts of the brain should be responding to CCK but are not in this PWS model. And then looking at, well, what are the other ways that we can stimulate those pathways? So we're excited about this because this specific hormone neuronal pathway is understudied and looks to be relevant in PWS. And this study will also use advanced brain imaging and stimulation of neuronal circuits to analyze the circuitry involved in receiving those signals and interpreting those satiety signals. So we know there are a couple of issues in PWS. One is the hunger, but also the lack of satiety. So people with PWS can eat a lot of food and still not feel full. So the long-term goal of this study is to improve the ability of appetite-suppressing drugs to signal that fullness in the PWS brain. Another study will look at something entirely different, the circadian rhythm and sleep mechanisms in PWS and also in Chaperones syndrome. So we know that sleep is a significant challenge both in PWS and Chaperones syndrome. And we know that, particularly in Chaperones syndrome, this is caused by mutations in the Magel2 gene. And there are specific mutations that have been associated with very well characterized disruptions in circadian rhythm. So here, Dr. Liu is going to use a mouse model with a mutation that mimics the human mutation that is known to cause a circadian rhythm disruption. And he'll be analyzing mouse sleep and other cyclic behaviors, so daily behaviors, using EEGs, brain explants, other mechanisms to understand the impact of this specific mutation on the function of Magel2 and why that causes these disruptions in sleep and circadian rhythm. We're excited about this study because of the significance of sleep disturbance, both in Chaperones syndrome and PWS. We know it leads to poorer health. It leads to more behavioral problems. It leads to metabolic issues. So by correcting this, potentially we can be addressing a lot of the issues that are present both in PWS and SYS. This is a unique mouse model with a patient-inspired Magel2 mutation, and there'll be the opportunity to look at this mouse model, look at stem cells from a patient with this mutation, and thereby be able to associate the characteristics across human and mouse. We hope in the long term that this data will lead to new approaches to treat sleep disturbances, which can be tested in this unique mouse model of Schaaf-Yang syndrome. And there will also be implications for PWS-associated sleep disturbances. As we know, these two disorders have very much overlapping but distinct uh, symptoms and characteristics. The next preclinical study that we are supporting comes from Dr. Rob Nichols, and Dr. Nichols has been looking at these proteins called ER chaperones, which help other proteins fold. They're called chaperones because they're helpful and they associate with other proteins and help them fold. And what he has noticed is that these ER chaperones are not working as well in PWS-derived cells. In addition to study those and study the impact of those, he has been working to really modify an existing mouse model so that it is now functioning as a much improved mouse model that really goes through those nutritional phases that we see in PWS. So we know when babies with PWS are born, they're not very interested in food. They may have failure to thrive. Then they begin to grow more normally, and then they develop hyperphagia. Well, Dr. Nichols can see some of those stages in this mouse model, which gives the opportunity to try to intervene at the early phases and potentially change the later phases. So the goal of this study is to measure gene expression, hormones, metabolites in this mouse model to understand the transition between those growth phases, and eventually to test to test drugs that will impact the function of these ER chaperones and ultimately to improve hormone production. We're excited about this study because it's important to understand these nutritional phases and what triggers the movement from one nutritional phase to the next. Also, testing a drug that has the potential to improve the production of multiple hormones at the same time. We know that there are many hormones in PWS that are produced, they're just not produced as well as they should be. So if we can nudge those over to where they're being produced at normal levels, that may address a lot of the problems of PWS symptoms at once. So the long-term goal of this study is a more complete definition of nutritional phases in this mouse model. What's the triggers of those transitions? Because that may improve the diagnosis and also ideas for ways to delay the phases that are sort of good growth and nutrition. Additionally, a potential new drug to improve PWS hormone deficiencies will be evaluated. Another promising potential therapeutic for PWS is called BDNF. So that is a brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it is a hormone that is secreted in the brain. It's needed for optimal growth, cognition, and appetite regulation. And there's evidence that it is, again, one of these hormones that is not missing in PWS, but reduced in PWS. So there have been a few proof of concept studies replacing BDNF or increasing BDNF in mouse models of PWS. And these have been effective, but it is difficult to get BDNF into the brain, get extra BDNF into the brain. So Dr. Capsoni is looking at delivering this BDNF intranasally, so squirt up the nose to treat, and she has been doing this in other neurological disorders and will bring that experience to PWS. So she is looking to design a formulation and a protocol for intranasal BDNF treatment in PWS. She's going to look at that in a mouse model and see if she can get that working in preparation for potentially looking at it in humans with PWS. So we're excited about this study because there is some demonstrated potential for BDNF therapy in PWS. Dr. Capsoni and her team have expertise in intranasal drug delivery. She is going to be using different models of PWS to demonstrate, hopefully, the safety and efficacy of this approach. And there's the potential for relatively rapid translation and evaluation in clinical trials. The ultimate goal of this study is the development of a non-invasive, easily administered nasal spray that improves multiple symptoms of PWS. So those are the preclinical studies. I'll mention two other studies that are clinical, so dealing with families and medical information directly. And the first is a study by Dr. McKinney, and it is adapting a group intervention for emotional dysregulation in PWS. So we know that there is a need for behavioral therapy designed specifically for PWS families, especially during the teen years. So I've raised 4 kids. The teen years are challenging no matter what, but for our loved ones with PWS, they can be a particularly challenging time. So this study is going to use a therapeutic approach that Dr. McKinney has developed in autism and adapt it to the PWS population. So the study goal is to work with medical professionals and PWS families to modify this program and then test it, and then kind of do an iterative process of refining the program for future use in a wider group of those with PWS. So we're excited about this program because we know that emotional regulation is a top priority for PWS families. This program will be based on a model program that had excellent results in teens with autism. And we are encouraged that the program will involve professionals and family members who have experience in PWS, which will help it be really adapted and useful for our PWS families. And this is an interesting program in that it involves not only the person with PWS, but the caregiver or parent, so they learn together. The long-term goal is to have a widely available therapy program regulating together for PWS, designed to specifically improve emotions, disruptive behaviors, and caregiver stress in PWS. So that looks very exciting. And finally, a study that will kind of loop back to what we talked about at the beginning, and the use of the GLP-1 or weight management medications in PWS. So we have started a collaboration with a team at Boston University to look at a huge data set and mine that for information about PWS. So we know that new data sets and new data analytics, for example, using AI technology, allow for a more comprehensive understanding of how medications are being used out in the real world, including, what are the safety side effects that come up and what is the efficacy of those medications. And the study goal here is to describe the use of weight management medications, the outcomes of the use of those medications, and the complications among approximately 14,000 people with PWS that have been identified in this very large data set, the Komoda Health Claims data set. So we're excited about this. Is a study being run by Dr. Eric Rubenstein and Andrew Stokes at Boston University. We're excited about the study because it uses AI and advanced analytics on one of the largest, or actually on the largest database of de-identified real-world patient data. This team has experience using this database, and so they're coming in ready to go. They are an experienced team, and the focus, particularly of Dr. Rubenstein, is to improve the lives of individuals with intellectual disability. So he has a long-standing commitment to improving the health of individuals with intellectual disability. He has experience, for example, in Down syndrome. This will be his first time working in PWS, but it aligns very nicely with his overall goals in his research group. And another really nice thing about this team is they're very interested in collaborating with experienced PWS researchers, and we've already started having meetings so they can learn about PWS, and also the PWS researchers can start to ask questions of this very large database about how people with PWS are receiving their care. Um, the long-term goal of the study is to understand the effectiveness and complications associated with weight management medications in individuals with PWS. That's at least where we're going to start. But we also expect to have insights into how care for individuals with PWS varies across different regions, urban versus rural, for example, across different races and ethnicities, across different insurances, and across different ages. So there's a lot of information about how individuals with PWS are receiving care that we hope to glean from this data set. And we also anticipate it being a very active collaboration among our, for example, our PWS CLIC investigators and this research team. So I think that is all of the new grants that we are funding for now. Looking ahead, I think this is going to be a very exciting year. We have a lot of researchers that we have been funding all along who have been looking at some of the basic biology of PWS, who are beginning to wrap up, you never wrap up research, but beginning to wrap up a portion of their research and share some new insights into the biology of PWS. So we're looking for that. Both the global registry and the CLIC sites have their own registry. We're looking to have more and more data within those registries. Our families that are in the global PWS registry and are also seeing CLIC investigators who are contributing to the CLIC database can link the data from both sources. So it will be data from the clinician, data from the parent, linked through a CRID, a clinical research ID that we can help you generate so that we can look at both sides of the equation, what the clinician is seeing and what the families are seeing. So we're happy to talk more about that. We expect more clinical trial opportunities. Some new companies are entering the PWS space, and we will keep you educated about what is coming down the line and give you the opportunity to learn more about that. And then the molecular therapies, including gene therapies, continue to advance. So you may be asking, or I hope you're asking at this point, how can I support PWS research? Well, I've been talking about the Global PWS Registry. Of course, that's a great way to contribute to the shared knowledge among our families. If you are seeing one of the clinicians in the PWS CLIC and they are contributing data to the CLIC database, please ask about joining that database as well. We ask that you learn about and consider participating in a clinical trial. Of course, participating in a clinical trial is always a decision for you and your doctor and the study team to make. So we will never pressure you to enroll in a clinical trial, but we do hope that you will learn about it and consider it. And signing up for the clinical trials alert and checking in on the clinical trials page is a great way to do that. If you're not eligible or you're not ready to participate in a clinical trial, please feel free to support those who are, because it is only, by contributing and enrolling in clinical trials that we're going to really learn if these new medications are safe and effective in PWS. We also encourage you, if you'd like to become an advocate reviewer, all of our grants are reviewed not only by scientists, but by family members to evaluate whether the research seems important to them. And it's a collaboration between the scientists and the advocates to prioritize what we want to fund each round. And of course, participating in a fundraiser or donating to FPWR is a great way to support research. So thank you very much. We hope to see you in Philly. I am happy to take any questions, Susan, if you've got them.
Teresa, as always, such a fabulous presentation. Thank you for taking the research that perhaps is more difficult for us to understand and really laying it out in such a wonderful way. Really exciting stuff is happening. For anyone who has questions, please feel free to start putting them into the chat and we will get through as many as we can. And also, um, or excuse me, that would be in the Q&A. I have placed links that you might be interested in the chat. So Teresa really had a lot of resources that she has been sharing throughout the webinar. If you are interested in any and all of them, go grab the links out of the chat while we go through some questions. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. Teresa, this BDNF nasal spray. I've heard of BDNF for many years. It looks like from your presentation that project is in preclinical studies. What's the timeline for a preclinical study before it goes into clinical trials?
Well, it depends. I know that's not a satisfying answer, but what they're looking at in this study in particular is different formulations. So, of course, one of the challenges with this is a peptide, so it's a biologic, is stability, number one, and then how well it is delivered. This has to get up into the brain. So, there's a lot of things that have to happen to get compounds up into the brain. So they're trying different formulations. If they find one that keeps the BDNF stable and is excellent at delivering, then the timeline is relatively short. Then you would have to do safety studies. You would have to do, it kind of moves up a level, right? The general lab work on animals is one thing, but if you're actually going to make something that is going to go into humans, then it would need to have some formal toxicity studies, FDA-directed toxicity studies. It would have to have what's called current GMP or good manufacturing practices. Development of the formulation. And those would take probably a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, and then it would be ready for clinical trials. And that's supposing that the formulations that they're testing turn out to be, good at crossing the blood-brain barrier and also good at maintaining the stability of the protein.
Mhm. The big data project, you mentioned 14,000 people are going to be included in that data set. Is that everyone? Is that 100% of the US?
It is like really close. This data set, I think covers, uh, I don't know exactly, it's Komodo data set. I think it covers 150 million lives, but up to 300 million. I think there's 330 million in the United States. So it's a pretty good, uh, it covers a lot of people.
That's really exciting. Do you think that we'll get to see more data than just the GLP-1s?
Yes, it does have that potential. The data set is updated pretty regularly. And so yes, we can also be looking at other medications as they come into use. And there's a lot of questions that can be asked, right? Even how many people with PWS are there in the US? We get asked that all the time, and there's not great data around that. So this may help us answer that question. How many people get diabetes? How many people are, taking this medication? How many are getting growth hormone as adults? So many questions that can be asked of this data set. And that's why we think it's important to have them collaborate with the PWS CLIC clinicians. And, it takes a lot of work, so we can't ask every question we want to ask, but there's a lot of questions that can be asked.
Sure. So we have a 17-year-old with PWS in our household. So we've seen emotional dysregulation. There's good days and there's bad days. I've had the opportunity to attend behavior sessions at conferences or through the Prader-Willi California Foundation that have been so incredibly helpful. So I'm really excited to see that there is going to be parent child training in this study. Do you know when we might anticipate them enrolling participants?
I think the initial groundwork will be modifying the study, but this is an 18-month study, and they intend to be, go through a group or two groups by the end of that 18 months. So it should be coming along pretty quickly.
Hmm.
within a year, I would say. Hopefully, we'll see some recruitment for that.
Well, that's going to be great. What about you mentioned sleep and the circadian differences that people with PWS and Xiaofeng have. Are there any existing treatments for people who are struggling with sleep during the day?
Yes, great segue into an active clinical trial by Harmony Biosciences that is looking at pitolisant and the ability of pitolisant to improve excessive daytime sleepiness. So please look at that on the clinical trial page. There are other existing medications that families have found useful. Modafinil is one of those. That is another wake promoting agent. Like all medications, it's not great for everybody, but many families have had good success with that. People have tried, there's a bright light therapy. I believe that's still enrolling that Deepan Singh has been looking at. We enrolled in that trial. I felt like it, or my son told me that it really helped him, and I felt like it helped him as well. And that is, being exposed to bright light. So it's a non-medication trial. If you're reluctant to do medications, being exposed to bright light. The great thing about that trial is after the trial, you get to keep the bright light. My son still does it every day because it made him feel better. And I think we were in the trial, probably 9 months ago. So there are both medication and non-medication possibilities, as well as a clinical trial, which would be a great way to see if pitolisant is safe and effective in PWS.
Mhm. Incoming question, why does it take years for hyperphagia to develop? Are there any hypotheses behind that development?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think the answer is we don't know. People have been trying to figure that out. Dr. Nichols' project is looking at that to some degree. Um, there have been studies looking at, like, is there a hormonal change? Some of the mouse models have shown that there is a decrease in responsiveness of a certain set of neurons, POMC neurons in the brain. In some of the mouse models, we've not been able to see that yet in the human models. So it's not clear yet, and definitely an area that requires more investigation. Because again, if you could stay, there's that magical kind of phase 2A where kids have, come through the failure to thrive stage, but have not hit the hyperphagia stage where they're growing and eating sort of on a normal curve. If you could stretch that out indefinitely, that would be sort of effectively a cure. So understanding that transition and why hyperphagia develops, because it is not present in, little babies. So why does it develop as we move along, is obviously a really important basic science question that unfortunately we have not been able to answer yet, but there is a lot of good work that is ongoing. So hopefully we'll have an answer soon.
That's great. Thank you. I see, Teresa, that we're at the top of the hour, but I'm so appreciative of you giving us your time and going through this material. I do have to plug before we leave the conference. The information is up here on the slide. It's a great opportunity to come out, get the latest in care, hear what's happening in research, and meet other families all in one space. So if you're available, we hope that we'll see you in Philly, October 9th and 10th. And until then, I hope everyone takes care. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.